Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds of Brews podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Kevin. I am Falcoholic Kevin, joined by, I believe this is the second time, Cody, because we played a couple years ago, the Falcons and the Colts meeting up once again, this time in Berlin. That's a new thing for these teams. He is Cody Felger, guys, host of Bring the Juice, also on the Believe Podcast Network. He's at CP. Is it Felger? Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, right. Felger 50. I was like, before I say this like 4 times, we should probably make sure I'm saying it right. But Cody, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm doing well. Still kind of riding the coattails of the Sauce Gardner news. So I am feeling pretty great right now, to be honest with you, even after not a great performance last Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm doing pretty well right now, man. How are you?
Yeah, Falcons land is not going super well, but we had a quiet trade deadline. Things are looking grim. The wheels appear to be falling off yet again, but it's kind of the opposite for the Colts, who I think there was a lot of worry this offseason about going in with another unsettled quarterback situation. When the news came down that Anthony Richardson had more or less lost the quarterback job to Daniel Jones, I know that sparked a lot of reactions because we've seen Daniel Jones not look very good for the vast majority of his career, but as it seems to be happening over and over again with these second contract quarterbacks, Daniel Jones comes in, has a competent staff and team around him, and is kind of having his own sort of Sam Darnold arc here, where he has now come in and provided really the spark and stability on offense that the Colts have desperately needed. And this roster all of a sudden looks way better than it ever did over the last couple of years under Anthony Richardson. So big turnaround in a short amount of time for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, no doubt. I always thought this offense had a lot of talent, but the question marks were, I think, twofold. Obviously, the tight end position was a huge one, and the Colts addressed that with Tyler Warren this offseason in the draft. But quarterback was obviously the biggest one that you were going to talk about. A quarterback that could, take what Shane Steichen did. And, something that I said, Kevin, is like, if Daniel Jones could even be like Gardner Minshew in 2023, right? Like, the Colts are going to be fine. Like, they were a couple plays away from being a playoff team. But certainly nobody could have expected Daniel Jones to do what he's done through the first 9-10 weeks of the season. It's crazy how well he's done. Again, everybody likes to point to the Pittsburgh game, and everybody's like, oh, this is the old Daniel Jones, but conveniently, don't talk about the other 8 weeks that he's played well. So, yeah, it's been awesome to see Daniel Jones thriving with Shane Steichen and, 2 football nerds fighting each other. It's just been very refreshing to have a quarterback that understands where, they need to go with the football, is able to spread the ball around like Daniel Jones has done and keep this offense to be one of the best offenses in the NFL on a consistent basis. So, yeah, it's been certainly I expected Daniel Jones to be a little bit more steady, but Daniel Jones is doing things that a lot of us didn't expect. He's not the dink and dunk. He's actually throwing the ball down the field. He's giving guys opportunities, and that's just something that didn't necessarily expect from Daniel Jones. But yeah, you're right. You see all these second kind of retread quarterbacks, if you will, with different chances at different teams. And it's been really cool to see Daniel Jones be another guy that the right system, right team, right players around him, he's finding success.
Yeah, I think it really puts it in perspective for a lot of people that are like, we have like fans and analysts trying to say like, oh, these second-year quarterbacks, well, they're just busts or they're not good. Like, it's like we've seen Daniel Jones played now. This is his 5th season and we don't, or 6th season now, and we don't know what Daniel Jones is. So there does seem to be this rush to evaluate quarterbacks and to have just the first word about, I'm going to be the first one to call this guy a bust and I'm going to be right or whatever, when a lot of the times situation and coaching make a difference. It's crazy what happens when you get some different coaches and schemes around. And it's kind of the opposite situation with the Falcons, who finally do have a quarterback I think you can believe in Michael Penix, who has been paired with obviously second-year offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, and started out okay. Things were looking good. Bijan was on a historic pace, Bijan Robinson, in terms of yards per game from scrimmage. And then it all kind of fell apart in the middle of these first 10 weeks. And it just appears that other teams have kind of figured out the Falcons offense. There's been pretty much every team has talked about how they know what plays are coming, and the Falcons really telegraph what they're doing with the motions. And it's looked really difficult for this Falcons team to do anything. Last week, they managed to take the New England Patriots to the absolute brink, end up missing an extra point to tie the game at the end, which is obviously not the way you want that to go. But even still, the 3 touchdowns were fades to Drake London in the end zone where he just makes circus catches. And it's like, there's got to be an easier way to score points than just throwing. And then Drake London's obviously great at that. But it just feels like this team's trying to push a boulder uphill, and it's caused this team that has defeated the Buffalo Bills, defeated the Vikings, defeated the Commanders, three playoff teams from last year, to also have a 0-30 loss to the Carolina Panthers and a blowout loss to the Miami Dolphins. We don't know what's going on here in Atlanta, and it seems to all come back to the coaching. So it seems like a situation where the Colts maybe had the roster issues, especially at quarterback, over the past few years, and I think some of that maybe was incorrectly blamed and laid at the feet of Shane Steichen, and perhaps he had something to do with it in terms of the roster construction. But finally, Shane Steichen gets a quarterback, and it's like, oh, wait, the offensive genius that we thought he was actually is a genius and just needed a quarterback the whole time. So who'd have thunk it? So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is crazy just how a year can change everything, right? Because a year ago, we were all, the debate was everywhere. I believe Anthony Richardson was benched at this point. So it's Joe Flacco out there slinging. It's crazy how what a difference a year can make in terms of just the outlook and how you're viewing coaches, how you're viewing quarterback situations. It's wild, man. So I think that goes to show, like you said, like you never truly know. And it's so easy for people to put labels on these quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks, with different situations. But you just never truly know from year to year what it's going to look like.
Yeah. There's so much going on with sort of the second wave quarterbacks that it's made the quarterback situation in the NFL look a lot better than it initially appeared. So that is a plus for everyone, especially our Superflex fantasy players who have been a lot of injuries this year. So thank God for some of these quarterbacks coming on. But at this, speaking of injuries, let's take a quick look at these injury reports so far. It looks like on the Colts side of things, quite a few players DNP at this point, and obviously we'll see the eventual status and how this shakes out. But some big names on here right now: DeForest Buckner, Samson Ebukam. I know Matt Goncalves was dealing with a personal issue, so it seems like that's not injury related. But Anthony Gould, the receiver, Tyquan Lewis, the defensive end, Kenny Moore at corner, and Michael Pittman also out with a glute injury. So what's your level of concern for some of those guys, especially the starting guys, who some of those are some significant names here for Indianapolis?
Yeah, to me, I wouldn't worry too much. The only guys that I think missed last week and also potentially our question marks would be Samson Ebukam. He's been out for a couple weeks. Tyquan Lewis as well. And then Anthony Gould, your kick punt return guy. Other than that, I don't really have a super level of concern because I believe that's from Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And sometimes they'll give some of their vets a little bit of a day off there. So there was no injuries, according to Shane Steichen, from last week's game. So I would assume they're just giving him some time off there. But obviously Ebukam and Lewis would be the big two. Anthony Gould would be a big one as well, because we saw in the Pittsburgh game, Josh Downs had to go return a punt. He muffs one, and ultimately the defense was able to help out in that, and he didn't allow a touchdown. But like that sort of stuff that Anthony Gould, you think would be ready for. So that's kind of the biggest one to me, would be the Anthony Gould one. If he can't go, then it's likely going to be Josh Downs down back there again at the punt return department. So that's just definitely something, because I think Anthony Gould is one of the best returners in both the punt and kick game in the NFL. He's got the speed to do it. He's one of the best ones coming out of the, college football when he got drafted. I think it was 24 when he got drafted. He was, very good in that department in his time in college. So that would be the big one that I would be concerned about. I know Sauce Gardner just cleared concussion protocol. He was in that when he was with the Jets, but he just cleared it. So he should be good to go. So really the big one is still Charvarius Ward. He's still on IR right now. I think this is the last game he has to officially be on IR before he clears potentially after the bye week. But he's the big one, I think, that you're missing still. Tyquan Lewis, Samson Ebukam. Those guys have been okay, but they've been kind of largely ineffective all year. So you're getting more young guys opportunities like JT Tuimuluau, who's a second-round pick this year, and a couple other guys you're giving more opportunities to. So all in all, I don't feel like the injury report for Indianapolis is too awfully crazy. And we'll have to see again. Stuff comes up obviously throughout the course of the week. But from an injury standpoint, nobody got injured to my knowledge, according to Steichen. And everybody except for Lewis and Ebukam and obviously Gould missed last week. So that's kind of, I think, where the injuries sit for the Indianapolis Colts, barring any new injuries that come up throughout the course of the week. But that's kind of where I think the Colts stand right now.
Okay, good to know there. And we'll see, obviously, just how much Sauce Gardner is able to do in the game. Imagine probably playing a lot of man coverage. So they're not asking him to make a lot of and figure out all the zones at once. But I would be surprised if he's not on the field, at least in some capacity, even just coming over here on Tuesday. So right. We'll see to what degree he plays. But it's not going to be injury related if he's not playing every snap, I wouldn't think. So, right. So at this point for the Falcons, the good news is it looks like they're going to get their slot corner Billy Bowman back this week. He's missed, I think, 3 games already. He was a full participant on Wednesday. Casey Washington, who's one of their reserve receivers, was also back at practice. And Zach Harrison, who is probably their best defensive lineman, finally returns after a 2-game absence as well. The players that are limited, not really any concern there with Mike Hughes, who's their CB2, and then J.D. Bertrand, who should probably not be playing, hopefully, and LaCale London, who's been one of their very nice surprises as a reserve defensive lineman. But the guys who are not participating are concerning because the Falcons ended up losing both Chris Lindstrom and Matthew Bergeron, who are the right and left guards, in the same game within the span of a couple drives, and that's not great news. Chris Lindstrom's supposed to be day-to-day. He's not practiced yet this week, and Bergeron is week to week, so he's probably not going to play. And then the Falcons were hoping to get their swing tackle back off of IR, Storm Norton, but he apparently suffered a setback, and it doesn't sound like he's going to be back, period, because his window was already open. So he didn't practice, and I can't imagine this is, I think, his 3rd week or 2nd week of his 21-day window. So we'll see what happens there, but Falcons were desperately hoping to get him back because they're on to their 4th tackle at this point in Elijah Wilkinson, who's had to play all year. And it doesn't look like the reinforcements that they were supposed to get are coming. So the offensive line, obviously in dire straits with now 3 reserve players in the lineup for Atlanta, unless Chris Lindstrom can be back, which would expect him to try. But, we don't know at this stage. And then Leonard Floyd, who's one of their top edge rushers in the rotation, he ended up leaving the game and also did not practice. So that's one to monitor going into the weekend as well. But really, it's offensive line injuries that seem to be the scariest for Atlanta at this point. And is that, something that the Colts could take advantage of? This Colts defense, I think, has been a very solid defense. They've been vulnerable against the pass, especially. But obviously, Sauce Gardner, maybe we'll see how much this week he can do. But over time, that's going to be a big boost, especially if you can get Charvarius Ward back in there. But how has the pass rush been for the Colts? Because that could be a real game changer against the Falcons if they're having to miss all of these guys at once.
It's crazy how much in the Colts' favor has been this year with just different offensive line injuries, with the Chargers. That was without Joe Alt and so many other guys, so they had a similar thing. But I would say in terms of the Colts' pass rush, it's been hot and cold this year. I think last week they looked really strong with what they were able to do against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Laiatu Latu, the 1st-round pick from 2014, he had 2.5 sacks in that game. He was absolutely everywhere. So he's starting to come on, so I could see that potentially being him setting for another good game there. DeForest Buckner, we all know DeForest Buckner and what he does. Whenever he's not double teamed, it's a problem for any opposing offense. So I would assume that's the idea again, is to double team him. The other edge position is interesting because you have Kwity Paye, who's never really been a huge sack guy, but he can get back there occasionally. So I would say the pass rush should take advantage, but I also say that, and there was times where pass rush should have been more dominant than they have been on the field. On paper, they should dominate, and they haven't necessarily always done that. Now, you did mention Charvarius Ward, and I will say the Colts, the last couple weeks have started to get a little bit more healthy in their secondary, even though you are still missing Ward. You got Jalen Jones back at corner last week, and he did a really good job on DK Metcalf all day long. And you still have Kenny Moore in the slot there. So The Colts are starting to get a little bit more healthy in their secondary, which I think is good. And now, obviously, adding Sauce Gardner in there will certainly help as well. So I think also, pass rush has definitely had their issues, but also the Colts have really had to play a good chunk of their season with third and fourth string corners a lot of times, like undrafted guys they've had to throw out there. So I think they do go hand in hand there. And I think, just having more available talented guys out there, some more polished guys out there at corner, I think will certainly help in that department. But I do hope that and expect the Colts pass rush with all the injuries that they should have a good day. But you never truly know from this unit because, like I said, it's been really hot and cold this year. So I think they still are missing a true alpha guy at this point. Latu's starting to become that, I think, but they still don't have that, number one guy off the edge.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams looking to find that. The Falcons certainly hope they've found that, and we'll get to the Falcons defense here shortly. But yeah, it's been an up and down season for the Colts defense overall. I mean, I think it's been much better than expected. I mean, 7th overall in scoring, despite you mentioned all the injuries. Yardage, a little bit of a different story. They're more like average in terms of yardage, but it's been mostly passing yardage allowed. Like the Colts, 26th in passing yardage, but in terms of the run game, the Colts have been very good against the run, allowing just 87 yards per game. Part of that has to do, obviously, with the offensive dominance and teams just not really being able to lean on the run. I know Colts are a little bit worse in terms of yards per carry allowed at 4.0, which is still a respectable number. It's tied for 9th. So, but yeah, it seems like the defense has been able to take advantage of the offense's success, and that's really been the story of the season, is that the Indianapolis offense has been outstanding. The number one offense in the NFL in scoring over 30 points per game, 32.2 would be close to an NFL record. I think at this point they're also second in yardage, and they're just like a yard off of the Bills in terms of being number one. Yards per play wise, they're tied for first as well with the Seattle Seahawks. You love to see that. They're in the top 10 of rushing yardage. They're obviously second in passing. I mean, this offense doesn't seem to have a lot of weaknesses at this point.
No, the big thing I think with this Colts offense, it's crazy, but they only lost by 7, but they turned the ball over 6 times, and the offense turned it over 5. So they really beat themselves. I think that's been the biggest thing this year is the Colts have beat themselves. In that Rams game, Adonai Mitchell no longer on the team, but 2 critical errors there with the drop ball in the end zone and then a holding penalty on a big Jonathan Taylor run. So the offense, it doesn't feel like teams have been able to beat the Colts offense as much as the Colts have just beat themselves. Last week I think was just such a huge outlier because the Colts offensive line's been a major strength and their tackles absolutely got whipped all day long by the Pittsburgh Steelers edge rusher. So I would expect that to not happen again, but I am kind of curious, how do they bounce back from that? Because as bad as Daniel Jones was, I mean, the turnovers and the interceptions were rough. I do think there also was an aspect of it as, he was just under pressure, constantly under duress. It was unbelievable. I hadn't seen the Colts offensive line look like that, honestly, since probably the Andrew Luck days. Like it was bad when it came to protecting him. So I think that's kind of a big thing is like, and that's going to be a big thing for the Falcons is if they can get pressure on Daniel Jones, I think that could definitely help them out in that favor. And that's kind of what Pittsburgh did. Because when Daniel Jones actually had time outside of a couple boneheaded mistakes there, with those interceptions, he still was able to get the ball down the field to his guys. But that's going to be, I think, the biggest thing. And also, I think the Indianapolis Colts got to get back to their bread and butter with Jonathan Taylor. I think he has to have a ton of carries in this game. They really passed it a lot in that game. Like Daniel Jones had, I think, 40 plus pass attempts in that game, it's just never going to be a recipe for success. I think he can do it when he has the proper time, but you want to rely on Jonathan Taylor in this running game and what you've done well for the past 5 years. I think that's just got to be your thing if you're the Indianapolis Colts. And that's why they've been so dominant is because they've been so balanced throughout the course of the year. And they were not balanced against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were passing it constantly. JT, I think, only got like 12 or 13 carries in that game. And again, I know you're trying to preserve him, but there comes a time and a place where it's working. Give him the football, So,
yeah. Especially in a matchup with the Steelers, where it's like you're thinking about playoff seeding, and it's like we can't drop this game to an AFC playoff potential rival. So,
exactly.
Yeah, frustrating stuff, I'm sure, for Colts fans, and all the turnovers obviously threw a wrench into the plans as well. But that's not likely to repeat itself. Although another surprise has been the Falcons defense, who have been, struggling ever since losing their middle linebacker Divine Diablo, who really just showed up and started playing like all pro level football, which was not what I expected. Certainly, since he's been in there, they've been trying to find a replacement. The aforementioned J.D. Bertrand has kind of become like a black sheep among Falcons fans because he looks totally unprepared to play. He just kind of stands there, and it looks like he doesn't know what he's supposed to do on any given play. They've given him 2 full games of reps. Then they finally last week brought in Ronnie Harrison to play middle linebacker, and he was much better. And then inexplicably put J.D. Bertrand in on the final drive of the game. Bertrand ends up giving up the critical third down conversion to the Patriots, who run out the clock. So not really sure what's going on with that. My working theory is that he just likes, the defensive coordinator just likes to watch the world burn. That's because that's the only thing I can figure out. But other than those snafus, the Falcons 4th in yardage allowed. The offense kind of crapping the bed and giving up some turnovers in some games has led to them being 15th in scoring. So they haven't been able to maintain their top 10 scoring pace that they were on. But in terms of yards per play, 7th, passing yardage, number 1 in the NFL, just 158 passing yards per game. They gave Josh Allen one of the worst games of his career. Same thing with Drake May last week. And they've been very good against the pass, but not so good against the run. They're vulnerable there. They don't have a true nose tackle. They are missing their middle linebacker, and the Falcons are currently 23rd in rushing yardage allowed, and in terms of yards per carry, only a little bit better at 19th. So they're vulnerable on the ground, and like you said, if this is an opportunity where the Colts are trying to maybe we shouldn't have Daniel Jones throw a bunch against the number 1 passing defense in the NFL, this could be a big spot for Jonathan Taylor potentially on Sunday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that'll just help everybody when you're able to establish the run, when you're able to sustain drives, which the Colts have been able to do, but weren't able to do against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just so weird because the Colts have been so good at not turning the ball over. They've been so good about, keeping that balance, dominating the time of possession. So I expected to try to get back to that again. I really do. And like you said, against the Falcons defense, it can be had in that way. So I do expect the Colts to try to make a statement here with Jonathan Taylor and really get this offense back on track to where they have been, because when they've given him a lot of carries this year, a lot of good things have happened. So, we see leading the NFL in rushing still. I would expect the Colts to definitely approach it that way for sure and say, hey, I think this is a way the Falcons can be had. And then once you're able to establish that run, maybe some things open up there, in the passing game.
Yeah, that's probably the way I would go. I think teams trying to test the Falcons in the passing game have not fared particularly well there. They had 6 sacks against Drake May. But yeah, the run defense, that's one of the more puzzling decisions I thought of this offseason, where the Falcons have made it clear that they wanted to go to a much more penetration style attacking defense, which I'm all for. But they have a lot of sort of undersized 3-4 defensive end type guys that they're playing on the interior, including maybe 3 of them at once, and there's just no beef in the middle. Like, if you're going to play all these light guys, you might want a big boy in the middle to soak up some blockers, and it's gotten them at times, even as well as they've played overall. I think all those lighter guys have had great seasons so far for the Falcons, but use a little more beef. So maybe that's an offseason thing to consider here for Atlanta. But let's check in with the spread so far. I think it's been pretty stable all week. So according to FanDuel, Colts 6.5-point home favorites in Berlin. So unfortunately the Colts get stuck with the international home game. So that's a pain, but it is what it is. But 6.5 points feels pretty fair to me. The Falcons have a habit of covering against good teams and not covering against bad teams. With the Patriots, I believe it was a 5.5-point spread. The Falcons cover that easily. So I still expect the Falcons to cover this, but like we've talked about, I don't know that they have an answer for Jonathan Taylor on defense. And while I don't think they're going to give up tons of yardage, the real kicker here could be just how much can Sauce Gardner give this defense, and can he slow down the Falcons' passing game, because we know how good the Colts' run defense is, and the Falcons have really struggled to run the ball against pretty much anyone over the last several weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm very curious. I mean, it seems like he's going to be good to go and he's not going to have limitations. So I'm curious, what do they do? Because I know the Jets didn't do a ton of this in his time where they had him go shadow guys. So I'm curious, like the Colts have done that with Charvarius Ward when he's been healthy. So do they do that or do they, put it more on Jalen Jones, who, like I said, had a pretty good day against DK Metcalf. He only had 2 catches in that game. So he's a good player in his own right. So I'm kind of curious what the game plan is there. With this, or do the Colts maybe use like a player like Jalen Jones, for example, or somebody else against a player like Kyle Pitts? Like, I am very curious on that. Or is it more of a Nick Cross or Cameron Bynum, the safeties? Like, I'm curious because I know Atlanta has so much talent on their offense. How do the Colts line it up? What does it look like? Is it more of just this is your side, this is his side, or do they truly get the 1v1 sort of thing with Sauce on him the entire game? I'm very curious how that's going to go.
Yeah, me too. And the biggest issue I think with the Falcons has been their tendency to just telegraph what they're doing and not set up the offense for success. And that could make it easier for someone like Sauce Gardner coming in with very little reps. Like, it may be simple enough to just have him shadow because it's like, you don't have to worry about anything happening behind you. You're just going to follow this guy and play man coverage. That could be the easiest way to acclimate him. And the Falcons really aren't going to do much to free up their guys. I mean, they run sort of dummy motions a lot, and they also tend to run motions that telegraph where the play is going. They love this little Y insert with the tight end where they'll motion the tight end and he'll just fill the gap that the running back's going to run through. And we've just seen teams just basically watch the tight end and follow where he's going, and they keep doing it. So yeah, you could tell we're having a real normal time over here in Atlanta. But I am happy for the Colts. You guys have been going through it the last couple years. It's a fun team to watch. Daniel Jones, I think, has always been likable. He had to deal with, as someone who lives in upstate New York, I do get the full dose of the New York media from time to time. Not the kindest necessarily treatment over there in New York City, but he's a likable guy. I'm glad he's having success, and the Colts look like they're this year's Commanders, like that could realistically contend. I mean, is that where you guys are at right now? Especially, I mean, the team seems to think so with the Sauce Gardner trade. So.
Yeah, I think so. If their offense can get back on track, I mean, outside of last week, their defense has been the problem. I mean, that's been the biggest reason why they didn't go into last week undefeated, honestly. So, yeah, I would say, when you get healthy, I think this is definitely a team that can compete for a Super Bowl. I really think they are. If Daniel Jones and this offense can continue to be as efficient as they have been. And I know I'm sure you've seen the narrative. They haven't played anybody. And I'm like, well, did we just conveniently throw out the Broncos and the Chargers and just label them?
Those seem like teams to me. I don't know.
I know. I'm just like, what in the world, So, yeah. And there's some good defenses. Like Denver has one of the best defenses in the NFL, right? And they're going to also be tested against Houston twice. So I'm curious how that's going to go. And Atlanta, like you said, one of the best passing offenses or defenses in the NFL. So, I do think, though, that, even though the schedule gets a little bit tougher down, the next couple games here to round out the season, I think this is going to be a good indication for where this team is. And I think when they're fully healthy, this is a team that can go toe-to-toe with anybody. And I really think that, talent-wise, I think they're right there with anybody. I really do. And now that you have potentially 2 guys that can lock down both sides of the field on defense, I mean, that's just something the Colts haven't had in quite a long time. I mean, even in their best seasons, they haven't had the type of corners they have now. It's crazy. I haven't seen anything like it. So I think just from a talent standpoint, I mean, you can argue the Colts have a lot of elite players at positions, even if, you don't, or really good to elite players, I should say, right? Like guys that are, top 10 in categories that matter. So yeah, I do think this is a team. And like you said, obviously they believe that they're a team that, needed to add kind of that cherry on top a little bit. To potentially, propel themselves from, we're a good team to potentially we could be a great team. So I think the belief's there. Certainly, I think the talent is there, but obviously, championships aren't won on paper. You got to go out there and compete and do it. But I definitely think this is a team that can do that and can go deep into the playoffs. I really think they can challenge anybody.
Yeah, we'll definitely see that. So last thing here before we wrap up. If the Falcons can pull off the upset, what's the pathway you think for them to get the better of this Colts team?
I think you got to take a book from the Steelers. I think if you're able to disrupt Daniel Jones, you're just able to take away that run game and force the Colts to be one-dimensional and put it on the right arms of Daniel Jones. I think that's the best chance that the Falcons will have here. And if you're able to, and it's just weird to say because the Colts haven't had this issue much. If you're able to kind of expose their tackles and get Daniel Jones under pressure consistently and not give him a clean pocket, because he has had a clean pocket for a good chunk of this year. But if you're able to do that on the defensive side of things and you're able to disrupt him, able to force him into some turnovers there when he's trying to play a little bit of hero ball, I think that will definitely go in the Falcons' favor for sure, especially with the players you guys have in your secondary. And then just when in terms of the Falcons' offense, I think if you're able to attack that middle, I mean, even though the Colts just added Sauce Gardner, their middle still is probably the biggest concern for me on their defense, especially their linebacker position. I was honestly a little surprised they didn't try to add somebody at the trade deadline, even like a Logan Wilson, who's somebody who just you specifically put out there on third down, can help in coverage, because that's definitely been an issue. So if you can get guys in the middle of the field, your slot guy, your Kyle Pitts, somebody like that, to start routinely doing that, I don't know if the Colts have the players necessary to be able to properly defend that, unless of course they're bringing down a guy at safety to do that or something like that. But I would say that's been, outside of the injuries, that's been probably their biggest issue. And if the Falcons' offensive line is able to hold up and give Michael Penix some time, because the Colts' pass rush, like I said, hasn't always necessarily taken advantage of the injuries to other offensive lines. So I would say those are some things. If you're looking at Atlanta, like if they're able to do those things or a couple of those things, I think they have a good chance in this game. And if you're able to get Jonathan Taylor bottled up or able to kind of force the Colts to go away from him, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. We'll see if the Falcons can pull it off. They have played up and down to their competition. So the Colts might be the best or the second best team, depending on your opinion of the Bills that the Falcons have played. So maybe they'll play their best or second best game this week. Who knows? But Cody, thank you so much for all the info. We're well prepared for this game as well as we can be. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in to the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcon Kevin. He is, like I said, Cody Felger at CP Felger 55. Cody, tell the people where they can find your show as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity, and you can find our show if you search on YouTube. Just search Bring the Juice Colts. You'll find us there, or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcasts, really. If you just search Bring the Juice Colts, you'll find us there. But I really do appreciate it, Kevin.
Absolutely. And guys, thank you again for tuning in. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And we will see you guys for post-game coverage coming a little earlier than normal because of the 9:30 kick time. So don't sleep too long on Sunday, folks. But we will see you guys then. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Until then, folks, thanks again for joining us. Have a good one.